All right, ladies and gentlemen, so now we are looking at the seventh move alternatives, and what that means in practice is that we are now going to play out the move knight db5, but after d6, now we are going to begin our investigation of moves that are not bishop g5. And so first on that list is going to be bishop e3. A developing move, which is, of course, a slightly bit odd one because bishop g5 feels a lot more natural, but it has its own points. In particular, I think in some variations, white is really hoping to plant a piece on b6, but as you will see, this is not going to be a real issue, and we also have no reason to deviate from our usual path. So a6 kicking the knight, and after knight a3, we are going to play a really, really weird one. So give me some time to explain this to you. We are going to play here the mysterious rook to b8. And that is not a move I assume most of us would have guessed without knowing the theory and the concepts behind it. So let me show you what's up. If we play here b5, then somehow now white's idea is going to come to the fore beautifully with knight d5, where knight takes d5 is a really unfortunate move. Note that rook b8 here still allows us to go back to our main line, and this move order is actually acceptable. But knight d5 is a very serious mistake here, because after ed knight e7 c4, now white gets all the fun. And this position is almost great for us. If we could he play b4, forcing the knight back to c2, we would be fine. But we can't do that, because here comes queen a4 check, and it's going to pick off the b4 pawn, and white is just winning the game without any issues whatsoever. Now picture this with the rook on b8. Da-da. And all of a sudden, we have the full picture. With a rook on b8, now we could play b4, as queen a4 check would be utterly harmless. Bishop d7, and the queen can't take the pawn since the rook on b8 is covering it. And also, if you consider that after here the mandatory take, knight b6 is now a game-winning threat. So again, that rook would be so nice already on b8. Hence, our move rook b8 first. Also note that we can afford this kind of a loss of a tempo, because having played bishop e3, white is really not putting any pressure on us as far as the d5 square is concerned. So knight d5, of course, is the main line. If they choose to play bishop g5, it's a very weird sideline, because obviously now after b5, we are back in main Sveshnikov territory. Knight d5 is absolutely atrocious here, because now after bishop e7, we are in the main line where black almost always wants to play rook b8. And so essentially we are up a tempo in one of the biggest main lines. And when I say up a tempo, I mean a super meaningful tempo, because the point of rook b8 is that white can't play a4, because after takes b2 hangs. And now we already have that move in, so this is just absolutely golden for black. And likewise, if bishop takes f6, actually not likewise, but rather I should say a little bit contrary to this logic here, although gf6 is also very good, but we can also benefit here from b8, rook b8 being played by taking with the queen. I don't know how much I like it, but I cannot, and I don't want to contradict our Lord and mighty overlord, I should say, the Silicon Beast, who confirms that this is significantly better than gf6. The point is that after knight d5, shockingly, the knight c7 check is not a game-winning threat. As in, that's not shocking. What's shocking is that we can utilize that fact by casually playing queen g6, allowing knight c7, knowing that it does absolutely nothing apart from losing the entire game, because knight on pawn on is not playable. And so after f3, we can just play knight e7. Again, the check is just completely a waste of space, because we go king d7, take, and we can easily complete development and then walk the king all the way back. And this is the first time when you are going to see this in this course, this motif that a lot of people tend to underestimate. For example, a club level player here, if you ask them to evaluate this position, they would say white is a heap better here because the white king is exposed, which is completely false, as in both parts of the claim, but I really want to pay attention here to the exposed king. It's not exposed because exposed would mean that it's exposed to something, and there is nothing that we are exposed to. No checks, no attack, nothing. The reality is that this position is much better for black, dominantly because of the incompetence of the two minor pieces, in particular the knight on a3 is a rotten piece that cannot simply do a useful thing. We even sack the e5 pawn, and then we just casually walk away with the king to f8. We have two bishops, and I can't repeat it enough times. The knight on a3 essentially means that we are up a piece. And note that playing c3 at any given time with the intention of rerouting the knight via c2 is really going to allow us to crank the position open on the queen side with b4, rook b4, and a very nasty attack is imminent there, especially knowing that we have a dark squared bishop and they don't. I really want you to have a good look at this line, potentially analyze it, put the engine on, play out a few moves. You will be shocked to see how much better it is from black's perspective than you would initially give credit for. So this is a tricky line, but trust me, trust us, this is absolutely perfect play by black. So yeah, bishop g5 is really not a concern. And so we are going to move on to our main idea, of course, from white's perspective, which is knight d5. Now, note that against knight d5, we can't take e4. This is basically the main point of the whole bishop e3 idea, which is that if I were to take it after bishop b6, it would be a very sad time to put the pieces back in the box, because now, indeed, our king does get under heavy attack with knight c7 incoming. So instead, we take the knight, and now we go to e7. Now, once again, this looks very counterintuitive in the sense that we are blocking bishop, blocking a lot of pieces in. It feels very passive, but the reality is that although this is going backwards, this is gonna go forward, and that move is gonna be a very fat tempo on the bishop on e3. So we are very excited to throw in knight f5 next. Indeed, knight f5, bishop d2 is forced. White cannot afford losing that bishop, or trading, I should say, trading that bishop for a knight, as the dark squared color complex and the dark diagonals would be then under black's command without any countermeasure whatsoever, not playable, and so white must retain the dark squared bishop. Bishop e7, logical development, preparing castling, and on the occasion, we can throw in bishop g5, trading the dark squared bishops again. Note how white has got pawns fixed on light squares, and so if you could hunt down the dark squared bishop, it would leave a fair few, excuse me, I'm trying to be cute with my squares, it would leave a fair, let me color it differently, a fair few dark squares weak in the position. And so trading of the dark squared bishops in general is typically favorable for us, as in for black. Right, so in this position, we have got two moves to look at, bishop e2 and bishop d3. Let's start with bishop e2. This is the more timid / less dangerous or less intimidating move, although I don't really fear bishop d3 either. We castle and we put the knight on h4. Why h4? Why not d4? I hear you ask. Two reasons. We would like to remind the white king that we are in the vicinity. We want to follow it up with f5. We would like to be the aggressors on the king side. Additionally to that, the knight on d4 can often be challenged with bishop e3, with knight c2. It's not an outpost that we are going to enjoy for a long time to come, and therefore it's more prudent to direct the knight toward the king side. b4 makes perfect sense in this structure, and I should have spoken about this, so I will do so now. In this structure, white has the 4 pawns against the 3, And so one of the main plans is to utilize this majority to play b4 and c5. In this regard, this little sideline with the 7 bishop e3 is a marvelous introduction for you into the 7 knight d5 line, which is going to be in another chapter where we are going to encounter the exact same pawn structure. So now we are already doing the warm-up exercises to understand what's going on in this very, very typical Sveshnikov pawn structure. So b4, bishop d7, completing development, getting ready to slide the rook to c8 if need be, rook c1, and rook c8. At first, we are going to take the wind out of white's sails by ensuring that the c5 break cannot come, and then we are going to focus on our own actions, which is going to be an f5 push and a potential break, a trade on bishop g5. The knight often reroutes to g6, from where it can jump on to f4. Black is quite happy here. We have no problems, and the knight on a3 is a very sad customer. The improved version of this line from white's perspective, and I'm going to now remove arrows and all the distractions. The other move is bishop d3, tagging the knight, placing the bishop somewhat more actively. But in the end of the day, we are going to stick to our guns. We play knight h4, and again, the plan is to come in with f5 and play on the king side. 3 options for white. King h1 first. This is a very typical prophylactic move in many Sicilians. It almost always signals white's desire to play an f-pawn move, whether it be f3 or f4, doesn't matter. They would like to step out of this check, which would have created an awkward double attack. Once again, prophylaxis. f5, f4. Knight g6. I really like this move because if we could, we would love to trade on f4 and obtain the dark squared bishop. A common misunderstanding here is to think that, oh yeah, I have a protected pass pawn on e4, life is now awesome. It's only partially true because it also kills the kingside play, and it allows white some very obvious piece placement for the remaining pieces. The knight can also be routed toward d4, and all of a sudden, all white pieces make perfect sense. And the position becomes very rigid and difficult to break. We don't have a pawn break here. g5 doesn't quite cut it. So we want this tension, or we want white to release the tension by capturing e5. Thus, knight g6. g3, white wants to retain the tension too. We go bishop f6. We want to provoke them to release the tension. Now e4 is a genuine threat, as it would be a double attack on d3 and, of course, on b2. Rook b1 defends that, and now we play bishop d7, completing development. And again, a very, very nice position has been achieved. All of our pieces are fulfilling meaningful jobs. The knight on a3 is still weird. And sometimes, and I really want you to keep this in mind, speaking of pawn breaks, now b5 can be quite annoying, after which the d5 pawn might lose its main support and may become a new target from black's perspective. Happy days. Instead of king h1, we could go immediately f4. In this case, we take, and knight g6. Note that as soon as you can, you go after the dark squared bishop. We would love to have that thing off of the board. And indeed, white very cleverly opts to trade the other bishop, and they keep the dark squared bishop to ensure that they have got sufficient control on the dark color complex. In fact, now they are trying to be very, very smart on the dark squares. And indeed, c5 threatens with knight c4, picking of the c5, the d6 pawn rather, excuse me. So believe it or not, but here, the best move we have is the not so pretty, but quite useful rook a8, sliding back where we came from. Now, this move forces white now to give up the c5 pawn, trading onto d6, and after take, we are going to look into a position that, again, is very easy to misevaluate and misunderstand. A lot of people would think that white is clearly better here because of the d5 pass pawn. The truth, however, is that Black is definitely not worse here because of the d5 pawn, which is not so much a passer, but an isolated weakness. And on top of that, the knight on a3 is also a problematic piece, difficult to bring it in. What I mean by that is that, for example, after take knight c4 is meant by queen c5 check, and we are winning the house. And otherwise, we will start piling up bishop f5, rook d8. And once again, it's crystal clear that d5 is not an asset. It's a weakness that needs to be constantly protected and, yeah, just covered by white. So no worries whatsoever. Last but not least, b4 is the most logical move here, after which we are going to play f5 again. c5 is still not a move. And now white has f3 and f4. If they play f3, bishop d7 develop, rook c8, rook c8 develop. We have seen this kind of dialogue, the to and fro. I want c5, I deny c5, I want c5. You get the gist. That's exactly what we are doing here. King h1, and then now we actually have transposed into the king h1 line, and we are doing really well. I feel that black has a much better chance to make something out of our 4 pawns versus 3 on the king side than white does with their 4 against our 3 on the other wing. So yeah, bishop g5 is a plan. Sometimes you push e4 takes, and then you push past, and then you plonk a knight on e5, and then we have a vicious king side attack. In general, black's position is definitely the easier one to play. If f4 instead of f3, we are going to capture again, not push, capture. Take, and we bring the knight back, once again going after the dark squared bishops. You can always tell when a course is well designed, and in this regard, I'm now not praising myself, but my lovely co-author, because you can see that in the various lines, the same ideas are repeated. So you are not all necessarily learning variation and variation and variation, but you are learning the lines, the variations through concepts, through ideas, through generic strategic observations. We want this bishop to be traded for a knight, preferably, but for a bishop is good too. We often use this h4 knight to accomplish that, and or to reroute the knight to e5, etc. Bishop f6, we have seen that too. Bishop e5, and now with queen h4 pending, once again, we are looking absolutely mighty. Better piece placement, better central control, and the prospect of a kingside attack. What more could we ask for? Well, not much else, ladies and gentlemen, as this concludes the bishop e3 variation. And with that, now we are going to move on to our other 2 lines, which are going to be knight a3 and 7a4. Alrighty, friends. So next up, we are going to look at knight a3 and pawn a4. They are sibling variations with very similar motives. I am going to explain what's up as we go, starting businesses with knight a3, or starting the business rather with knight a3. Now, this move looks weird, and the reason for that is because it is weird. The idea is that white prophylactically wants to remove the knight from the attack of a6, b5 and reroute via c4 before b5 could land. The problem with this move is that it's ugly and it goes against principles. And this is a good point where I would like to bring up that no matter what opening course you are learning, don't forget that primarily you never play an opening, you play chess. And chess principles tell you that moving the knight in the first 7 moves of a chess game 1, 2, 3, 4 times is not advisable. In fact, it's bound to be bad. And so you must be very critical when you see stuff like this and you go like, well, it is time to turn on the heat. And in order to do that, we now switch into a very dynamic play style by playing bishop g4. And this is a very interesting conflict here, because bishop g4 strategically is a bad move, because we want our light squared bishop, because that's a guardian of the d5 square. So the trade of the light squared bishops technically should be undesirable. However, you know, especially if you watch me and if you have some of my other courses, I'm a big proponent of this idea that dynamic chess and tactics always beat the strategic and the positional. So positionally, it's a bad trade. Dynamically, we are killing it. We have a knight on d4, and now we have got d5. It's no longer Sveshnikov. It's just a game of chess where our opponent played X knight moves, where X is a lot more than acceptable, and we are in punish mode. Look at this. Castles, bishop a3, ba3, rook c8, and I cannot poke a stick at anything in this position that doesn't favor black. Superior development, superior central control, far better pawn structure, ironically, with 3 isolated pawns, and the pending game-winning rook takes c3 threat. Beautiful chess. If they play f3, now admittedly we will switch back to a mix between positional and dynamic, bishop e6. And as you will see very soon, having forced f3 is a huge accomplishment. Bishop c4 and bishop g5 are my 2 moves. Bishop c4 is very well met by the thematic a6. And another point where I need to talk to you about structure. Although if you are already a keen Sveshnikov player, you would know this, but I would like to put it out there just to be sure that we are all G with this. Double pawns, typically in the Sveshnikov, are blessings. They are our treasures. We love them because typically they help us to carry out pawn breaks. Right now, after f8, d5 becomes a lot easier to play because now we have got a backup pawn to take back with on d5. Additionally, it also helps us to open up the f file to make it a semi-open one, so it's good news only. Actually, bishop takes e6 is not even a discussed line in the course for that reason. If they drop back to b3, knight d4 again, and it's crystal clear that our pieces are far more harmoniously placed. The bishop on c1 is weird. White hasn't castled yet, although they are about to do that. But the standard rook c8, b5, just doing the typical Sicilian stuff, is going to grant us an advantage no less with black. If knight d5 right away, then it seems like white is going to be able to conquer the d5 square and be able to take back with peace on d5, which is always the desired method for white, but nah, because remember, double pawns are our best friends. So bring on the double pawns. Castles is main line. If they take f6, booyah. And now we are ready to break with d5, f5. If they take, booyah again. This is not a compromised pawn structure. This is strength. This is a powerhouse, if you will. Those 4 pawns combined together there will facilitate, allow, in particular the e6 one, the d5 break, the f5 break, both carried out in the same game. Then bishop g7, knight g6, castles, and the Sveshnikov nerd chills are already coming up on my skin as I see that pawn mass just going forward and pushing back everything white could try to put in its way. But nah, that is going to be an absolute avalanche of pawns. Bring on the dubs. I'm going to show you an exemption, by the way, too, very soon. So, yeah. If bishop c4, knight e7, and then castles, we then take on d5, we then take on d5 again, and now, after all, white has failed to recapture on d5 with pieces. Now they are occupying the d5 square with a pawn, which, given how the rest of their setup looks like, is just simply insufficient. We will see a lot this pawn structure in the next chapters, in the 7 knight d5 one, but there white dedicates every single move and plan to this idea, whereas here they weren't. That's the result. 1, 2 very poorly placed pieces. We can castle, move the knight, f5, rook c8, b5. We stand better in the king side, center, and the queen side. Everywhere else, white is fine. But in these parts, 3 parts of the board, black is definitely dominant. So, yeah, that's about it. And so let's move on to bishop g5. This is going to be a really fun line. Bishop e7. And now I have got for you bishop takes f6. and knight c4. If bishop takes, bishop c4, and bishop g5. And now for the first time you will appreciate having provoked f3, as now we dominate this diagonal, but we also have some very filthy threats on the a7 g1 diagonal too, because of that pawn has moved up. We can check with the queen, we can check with the bishop and park the bishop on d4. The opportunities are endless. Knight e5, a6, just on time to deny bishop b3 by b5 when the knight is actually eternally frozen on a3. Black is clearly better, no questions asked. If knight c4, now comes the twist in my double pawn story. Castles, bishop takes, and we do not take with the pawn. Why? When I kept on going on about, oh yes, dubs. It's because chess is never that easy a game. There are always exceptions to the rule, and this is a marvelously good example to that. Ultimately, white is going to be able to play knight e3, freezing both pawn breaks entirely, when we would end up sitting on a very unpleasant structure that offers 0 breaks for black. Instead, we retake with the bishop, sack a pawn on d6, and play in style of Morphy, as we should, recognizing that our development is complete, ready to fight. Theirs isn't. So let's go. If knight d6, then knight d4 is very strong, disconnecting queen from knight. And after bishop g5, white is in a world of hurt with that king still 3 moves away from castling. We are coming in from here, we are coming in from here. The rook is already trained on the c file. This is disaster in the making for white. Not playable. Queen d6 is better. And now I'm going to uncork a really cool tactic. Watch this. Check. And then queen f6. Not only do we dodge the undesired queen trade, but in fact, we are threatening to take f3. And on top of all, the bishop is immune to capture due to check when king e2 loses to bishop c4, and king d1 loses to rook d8. Ta-da! And so, they have to castle, and now they are just going to fall apart. The rooks are disconnected, development is incomplete, and we are just gonna go ham with the attack. Check. Rook d1, rook d8. Take the f3 pawn, penetrate with the queen, claim victory. We're dominating the board. The knights are extremely awkwardly relying on each other. On top of that, the bishop is also covered by the knight. Rook d2 is incoming. Knight d4 is incoming. Game over is incoming. And that, ladies and gents, concludes knight a3. And we move on to the a4 variation, which, as I already mentioned earlier, is a sibling variation of knight a3, because after a6, knight a3, we have the same position with the insertion of these 2 pawn moves. Now, that, in my opinion, favors black more than white, because a6 obviously cuts out a lot of b5 potential pieces to come into b5, whereas a4 weakens b4. So now we are going to jump onto b4 at times. We stick with bishop g4. We are not changing the winning team. Same story, bishop e2. You can even play d5 right away. And the resulting positions are always superb. If ed, knight d. If knight d, queen d, and look at the central control, my goodness. This is just not chef's kiss perfect chess. And for the first but not last time in this chapter, I will mention that our plan in such structures is to castle and send it f5, e4, f4, f3, rip into that king's defense, checkmate it. If knight c4, then we go now more positional, and we are going to simply play against the unlimited number of isolated pawns. Queen c7, we back the e5 pawn with f6, and then we start piling up on the c file and start hurting white on those chronically and tragically weak pawns. If bishop g5, we take e4. Now, if knight e4, then queen a5 check, dodging the pin, and then we trade, and you already see the outline of this previous position with the f5 attack pending. So we send the bishop on its merry way, and after rook d8, we are threatening again the same kingside expansion, f5, f4, e4. Just these two pawns are such powerful attacking tools. It's crazy. And white doesn't really have anything on the other side to play for, so black has a very healthy position here indeed. Last but not least, if bishop f6, we retake with the queen, knight d5, we pull back, and again, bishop c5, castles, and you know the drill. We are going to play king h8, just to dodge queen c4 being an awkward double attack. And then f5, pull the bishop back, e4, f4, queen g5, f3, attack, attack, checkmate, Sveshnikov, best opening, bang. That's how we do it. This is, again, a beautiful variation to demonstrate the fun we are promised when we play the Sveshnikov variation. And ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of this chapter. And in the next one, we are going to begin to analyze and learn one of the biggest sidelines of the Sveshnikov, which is going to be 795, leading to a very unique pawn structure, which is very important to know and understand, even if you are not a Sveshnikov player. So I'm super excited to have a good look-see at that one. So let's see what awaits in chapter 3.